My beloved child, I need you to surrender just one single minute to me. Stop exactly where you are. Do not rush past this. Do not mindlessly scroll away. Do not let this fragile, holy second slip through your trembling fingers, the way you have allowed so many others to fade before. I am deliberately stepping into the chaos of your day, shifting the very atmosphere of your thoughts, and breaking through your reality, because it is absolutely vital that you hear my voice right now. I need your racing heart to come to a sudden, peaceful halt. I need your suffocated spirit to take a deep, expanding breath. I am asking for your undivided attention, not because I am a dictator demanding submission, but because the very miracle you have been desperately crying out for is hovering so much closer than you could ever comprehend. If you move too fast, if you allow the noise of the world to distract you for one more second, if you aggressively push this aside, as you have brushed away so many divine whispers in the past, you stand on the precipice of entirely missing the profound gift I have placed directly in your path. So, I am asking you again, with a gentleness that masks a fierce and beautiful urgency, can you grant me just 1 minute? I am not demanding the entirety of your exhausting day. I am not asking for the last fragile reserves of your shattered strength. I am only asking for this singular heartbeat, this one small, sacred clearing where the heavy hands of the world finally loosen their grip on your throat, long enough for you to actually feel my presence once more. I know intimately how often you have sprinted past these gentle invitations. I know the exact number of times you felt my spirit tug violently at your heartstrings, only for you to whisper, "Later, maybe later." I know how frequently you felt the unmistakable electric charge of something deeply important, only to brush it aside because the deafening static of your life felt entirely too loud, too crushing, too paralyzing to simply stop and listen. I know how many times you promised yourself you would return to me, yet you never found your way back. But this fleeting moment is remarkably different. You can feel it vibrating in your chest, can't you? Something deep within the architecture of your soul is softening right now, growing quieter, breaking open, and becoming vastly more receptive than usual. Something within your very core recognizes the immense, undeniable weight of these words. Your spirit knows that I am not some distant entity residing galaxies away. I am right here. I am drawing dangerously close, reaching out for you in a profound way that defies human logic, but absolutely demands your acknowledgement. This intersection of time is not a random glitch in the universe. It is no accident. I meticulously aligned this exact second with the timeline of your life because your weary heart has been drifting dangerously far out into the deep waters, and I had to violently intervene before something unimaginably precious slipped forever from your grasp. Your life has been a chaotic hurricane lately. So many warring thoughts, so many paralyzing worries, so many violent emotional storms swirling so wildly inside your mind that you haven't even possessed the quiet space to hear the sound of your own breathing. The world has been mercilessly dragging you in 1,000 different, agonizing directions. You have been running on absolute empty, speeding down a desolate highway without even recognizing how many fractured pieces of your own identity you have been leaving behind in the dust. You are not just physically fatigued, your very soul is bone, tired. You have been suffocated, not just mentally, but deeply and dangerously on a spiritual level. You have been silently carrying mountains on your back that were never meant for your shoulders alone. You have been fighting catastrophic, invisible wars in the darkest rooms of your mind, wearing a mask of unbreakable strength, pretending that you are perfectly fine, pretending that the crushing weight isn't burying you alive. Because the sheer volume of your survival has been so blindingly loud, you have entirely missed my gentle, guiding voice. You missed the quiet signs. You overlooked the soft, deliberate nudges I carefully laid across your path. It was not because you lacked care, but because you were drowning in burdens. It was not because you were actively ignoring me, but because your heart was bruised and battered. It was not because you stopped loving me, but because you have been strictly surviving far more than you have been living. But I saw it all. I saw the hollow exhaustion carving out your eyes. I saw the leaden heaviness anchoring your steps. I saw the chaotic emotions you violently shoved down into the dark, so that no one else would have to bear the burden of worrying about you. That is precisely why I am standing before you right now. That is why my voice echoes closer and louder than it ever has. That is why your heart is leaping inside your chest, even if your logical mind cannot yet comprehend the reason. You have been aggressively praying for massive, secret, earth-shattering things. Prayers that you could only whisper through blinding hot tears. Prayers that you buried deep under your breath, terrified that no one else would understand. Prayers you genuinely believed were not eloquent enough, strong enough, or worthy enough to pierce the floor of heaven. But they did. Every single shattered syllable reached my ears. I personally carried those desperate pleas. I listened to your weeping when you were entirely convinced the rest of the world was deaf to your pain. I held those trembling prayers in my own hands, and I began orchestrating breathtaking answers in dimensions you still cannot fathom. And right now, in this very hour, one of those massive breakthroughs, one of those exact miraculous moments you have begged for, is finally breaching the horizon of your life. But you must be violently awake to receive it. You must be deeply present. You must be spiritually aligned to inherit it. That is why I demand your attention right now, not to cage you, but to fiercely protect the magnificent blessing I am sending your way. If you rush past this monumental second, if you carelessly skim through these living words, if you retreat into your habitual distractions, the moment reality feels too deep or too intense, you stand to miss the very miracle you have been begging me to deliver. Let me hold you entirely still for just a fraction of time. Let me permanently hush the deafening roar of the world outside your window. Let me quiet the violent warfare inside your skull just for right now. Just for this 1 minute, this one breath, where your fortified soul softens, just enough to let my voice penetrate the armor. Comment: God is my safe refuge, if you run to him when life is unbearably heavy. My precious child, I know perfectly well how many times you have sprinted in the opposite direction from moments exactly like this, because actually feeling your own emotions felt far too dangerous. I know how many times you actively refused to look your own bleeding trauma in the eye. I know how many times you violently pulled back because you had completely lost the ability to trust that anything genuinely good could ever find its way to you again. I know how many times you ran away, because running felt infinitely safer than daring to hope. I know how many times you willfully ignored my whisper because your shattered heart simply stopped believing that transformation was even possible. But hear this: I never once stopped pursuing you. I never stopped closing the distance. I never stopped reaching into your darkness. I relentlessly loved you right through your impenetrable walls, through your paralyzing fears, and through your deafening silence. You have been desperately hunting for peace, yet sprinting with so much internal noise that you couldn't possibly hear it arrive. You have been begging for direction, yet willfully drowning in toxic distractions that only breed more confusion. You have been starving for comfort, yet wrapping yourself in fleeting, hollow things that only numb the pain instead of curing the disease. You have been aggressively searching for me, yet completely forgetting how to hit the brakes long enough to actually let me speak. So, I forcefully entered your reality. I hijacked your day. I tore through the atmosphere of your room and whispered, "Can you give me 1 minute?" What you are staring at right now is not merely digital text glowing on a screen. It is a highly classified, divinely engineered appointment arranged by heaven itself. It is a monumental intersection, I personally positioned in your timeline, because your battered spirit is finally irrevocably ready ready to hear me, ready to release the agony, ready to receive the staggering inheritance I have been constructing behind the invisible curtain of the world. You may not possess all the answers yet. You may feel wildly unprepared. You may be completely blind to what is approaching. But trust my voice. This exact moment changes everything. Let me pull back the veil and reveal precisely why I had to violently interrupt your life like this. Why I reached into the mundane rhythm of your day with a sudden magnetic pull that you physically felt in the center of your chest. Why these highly intentional words collided with you at the exact millisecond your mind was wandering, and your heart felt like giving up entirely. You have been suffocating under an unbearable avalanche of pressure for far too long, dragging around a toxic weight that has been crushing your spirit in devastating ways you refuse to admit. Even when looking in the mirror, you have been navigating your daily existence with an invisible anvil resting quietly on your shoulders. It is a heaviness you ruthlessly force down into the pit of your stomach, just so you can function in society. A heaviness you expertly camouflage behind fake, hollow laughter, behind mindless daily routines, behind endless digital distractions, behind a terrifying facade of strength that instantly drains your life force the second you finally lock your bedroom door and are completely alone. You have been mentally obliterated, desperately trying to hold the entire universe together, while the fragile pieces of your own heart feel like sand slipping rapidly through your trembling fingers. You have fallen spiritually silent, not because your faith evaporated, not because you reject me, but because your inner spirit has simply been drowning under the catastrophic noise of everything you have been forced to handle completely alone. You have been drifting, my child, and you were entirely blind to the current pulling you under. Drifting does not announce itself with blaring sirens. It happens with terrifying stealth. Quietly, slowly, gently. It is the lethal culmination of one tiny compromise at a time. One skipped prayer at a time. One ignored spiritual tug at a time. It happens when reality gets too loud, when your unprocessed trauma gets too heavy, when your racing thoughts become a crowded, suffocating prison cell. You drifted not because you were actively rebelling against me, but because you were merely surviving the war instead of actually living your life. You drifted because you were lethally exhausted. You drifted because your fragile heart had absorbed entirely too many direct hits. You drifted because you have been desperately waiting for just one single person to look you in the eyes and finally recognize how much agony you have been carrying. And tragically, you simply grew accustomed to the deafening silence of being entirely alone. But I saw the truth. I watched your vibrant spirit fade into a whisper. I saw your resilient hope stretch paper. Thin, I saw you slowly severing the vital connections to the very pieces of your soul that once made you feel brilliantly alive. I saw you plunging headfirst into a cold, protective numbness, and I absolutely refused to allow you to evaporate into the void without violently reaching out to pull you back to the surface. You have been hauling agonizing, toxic burdens entirely by yourself, burdens that were never ever designed to be carried without my supernatural intervention. You violently forced everything to hold together because you were terrified of being a burden to anyone else. You repeatedly lied to your own reflection, insisting you were strong enough to take the hit, even as your internal infrastructure was catastrophically collapsing. You shoved your way through blinding pain by aggressively pretending it wasn't there. You navigated crippling grief by burying it alive in the backyard of your mind. You walked through soul-crushing loneliness by putting on a masterclass in pretending you loved the isolation. You were so utterly terrified of falling apart that you refused to allow yourself to feel anything on a deep level. You were so terrified of shattering into a million pieces that you locked your heart in a steel vault, tightening the perimeter so severely that even pure, unfiltered joy couldn't find a crack to slip through. You carried massive, gaping emotional lacerations without ever applying a single bandage. You carried a marrow, deep exhaustion without ever allowing yourself a second of genuine rest. You carried catastrophic heartbreak without ever pursuing the grueling work of healing. You strapped responsibilities to your back that crushed your soul until you entirely forgot what it felt like to draw a breath without immense, agonizing pressure. To merely survive the battlefield, you anesthetized yourself. You ruthlessly silenced your own screaming needs so you wouldn't feel the panic of falling behind. You overloaded your schedule with hollow distractions so you wouldn't be forced to confront the radioactive ache burning in your chest. You stayed frantically busy so you wouldn't have to think. You kept running on broken legs. You looked people in the eye and swore you were completely fine, even as you were slipping deeper into an abyss where my voice was becoming nothing but a muffled echo. You were not rejecting me. You were simply protecting your battered heart using the only desperate survival tactics you knew. You weren't running away in rebellion. I watched you quietly, desperately trying to keep your chest from imploding. I know exactly why you pulled the plug on your emotions. I know why you boarded up the windows to your heart. I know why you brutally lowered your expectations to zero. I know exactly why you brainwashed yourself into believing that if you stopped feeling, stopped hoping, stopped trusting, you could never be destroyed again. You genuinely believed that absolute numbness would be your savior from the pain, but that very numbness was actively assassinating your ability to receive the breathtaking blessing charging toward you right now. Please support our channel. Our core mission is to inject explosive joy, unbreakable peace, and fierce devotion to God directly into your life. If you feel compelled, you can show your massive support and encouragement by donating through Super Thanks. And that, my beautifully broken child, is exactly why I had to violently throw myself in front of your path to stop you. That is why my voice is echoing with a thunderous authority you haven't felt in years. That is why this exact moment feels unspeakably heavy, intensely deliberate, and completely undeniable. You were rapidly sinking into a toxic silence that would have permanently blinded you to the massive breakthrough you've spent years crying out for. You were drowning in a lethal exhaustion that would have caused you to step right over the miracles heaven has been meticulously constructing just for you. You were descending into a cryogenic numbness that would render you entirely incapable of recognizing the divine open doors I have specifically placed in your immediate future. You were locking yourself into an emotional survival bunker at the exact millisecond a monumental victory was marching toward your front door. And because I could vividly see how breathtakingly close your blessing was, I absolutely refused to allow you to drift away into the abyss. I was forced to intervene. I had to violently rip into the fabric of your day in a manner so shocking you would physically feel it. A divine interruption designed to force you to slam on the brakes. An intervention engineered to aggressively pull your fading heart back from the terrifying edge of total exhaustion. You were millimeters away from entirely missing a destiny that has your exact name eternally engraved upon it. Something I began preparing for you eons before you even realized you were broken. Something so powerful it will permanently resurrect the dead, shattered pieces of your soul that you buried and held funerals for long ago. I watched as your battered heart was becoming far too exhausted to actually receive the miracle racing toward it. So I stepped onto the battlefield before you lost your final drop of blood. I stepped into this exact millisecond because you have been brutally dragging yourself through life with the crushing weight of 10 catastrophic simultaneous wars pressing down on your skull. I stepped in because you have been functioning on less than zero while constantly lying to the mirror that you're doing okay. I stepped in because I saw that you had virtually zero real estate left in your heart to actually feel my presence. And I absolutely refused to lose you to the cold grip of numbness, paralyzing fear, or terminal emotional fatigue. My beloved, you must comprehend this with absolute clarity. Heaven stopped the spinning of the universe to align this exact, highly specific minute exclusively for you. Not yesterday, not an hour ago, not next week, right now. This precise, singular second in time was fiercely chosen, deliberately marked, and masterfully designed entirely for the rescue of your heart. Every single breath you have ever taken has been violently pulling you toward this exact message. Every agonizing, sleepless night, every scalding, silent tear, every prayer that felt like it hit a brass ceiling, every desperate whisper you exhaled into the pitch, black darkness, every moment you felt entirely abandoned, every second you felt completely invisible, every agonizing season you believed your life was permanently trapped in a cage. All of it, every single brutal second, was meticulously leading you right here, to this specific breath, to this exact divine collision with your Creator. This is no coincidence. This is not a random algorithm. This is a masterstroke of divine architecture. I perfectly inserted this moment into the timeline of your existence, because your bleeding heart fundamentally required it to survive. I dragged you here because your starving spirit was violently reaching out for a lifeline, even when your exhausted brain had no idea what you were actually searching for. I aligned this exact minute because you were actively drowning in an ocean of crushing responsibilities, deafening noise, agonizing trauma, and blinding exhaustion. And you were mere seconds away from slipping completely under the ice of permanent numbness. I orchestrated this exact collision because the colossal blessing charging into your reality absolutely requires you to wake up. It requires you to breathe fire again, to feel deeply again, to aggressively reconnect your spirit to mine. I aligned this minute because I needed your heart securely locked in the exact right posture to inherit the staggering reality heaven has prepared for you. Come closer, right now. Lean into this, because I am about to speak a surgical truth into the darkest, most heavily guarded vaults of your soul. The terrifying places you have masterfully learned to hide, even from your own reflection. I want to talk to you about the agony, the radioactive pain you buried alive in the backyard of your mind, the trauma you constantly minimize, telling yourself, others have it worse. The devastation you walked through in absolute suffocating silence because you were genuinely terrified that not a single human being on this earth would actually care enough to help you carry the body. But I saw the reality. I saw the devastating heartbreak that split you open like an earthquake in ways you still have not recovered from. I saw the exact second when the person you trusted with your entire life violently betrayed you. I saw when the one you loved relentlessly simply packed up and walked away. I saw when you handed someone the most fragile, beautiful pieces of your soul, and they carelessly crushed them under their boots. I saw exactly how deep that blade went. I saw how desperately you tried to force yourself to move on, while you were still actively hemorrhaging on the inside. I saw you meticulously painting a bright smile on your face, while behind your eyes, your entire universe was burning to the ground. You aggressively lied to yourself, claiming you are completely over it. But the undeniable truth is that you have been secretly hauling around the catastrophic aftershocks of that betrayal for years longer than you will ever admit. You carry that radioactive ache in highly secretive ways, vehemently avoiding certain triggers, assassinating certain hopes before they can grow, violently rejecting specific dreams because you are utterly paralyzed by the terror of ever feeling that exact brand of agony again. You constructed towering, impenetrable walls of steel, not because you despise love, but because you are absolutely petrified of being entirely annihilated again. And oh, my precious child, I felt every single tremor of that pain right alongside you. I was fiercely standing shoulder to shoulder with you when your entire world collapsed. I held you together when you were completely convinced. No one in the universe even noticed you were falling apart. I physically caught your scalding tears before they ever had the chance to stain the ground. I saw the devastating exhaustion radiating from your bones, the kind of terminal fatigue that no amount of sleep can ever cure, born from fighting entirely too many apocalyptic wars completely alone. You have been tired deep in your marrow, tired in your racing thoughts, tired in the very fabric of your soul. You are so violently sick of pretending, sick of waiting, sick of hoping, sick of feeling like you are permanently assigned the role of the strong one, the unbreakable pillar who is forced to hold the sky up for everyone else, while inside you are screaming in agony for just one safe corner where you can finally collapse. You have been running on fumes, furiously pouring water from a violently shattered cup. You have been obsessively giving to others when you are the one actively starving. You have been relentlessly holding others together while your soul is screaming to finally be held. And I witnessed every brutal second of it. I saw the violent trembling in your battered spirit. I saw the physical gravity pulling down your spine. I saw those agonizing moments when you felt entirely too weak to take one more step. Yet, you took the step anyway. I saw the crushing weight of your deepest disappointments. Those devastating moments when you dared to hope with every fiber of your being, only to be met with the violent sting of yet another door slamming directly in your face. Those cruel seasons when you finally lowered your guard, allowing yourself to actually believe the nightmare was over, only for life to maliciously twist the knife in the opposite direction. I saw the light die in your eyes when the people who swore they had your back completely abandoned you, when ironclad promises were casually shattered, when massive expectations evaporated into thin air, when golden opportunities slipped through your bleeding fingers like sand. I watched as those toxic disappointments piled up inside your chest, brick by heavy brick, until you were absolutely terrified to ever hope for anything ever again. But listen to me. I gathered every single one of those shattered disappointments with fierce protective care. I never once mocked your fragile hope. I never once dismissed your massive dreams as foolish. I never once looked away from your bleeding wounds. I saw your crippling, suffocating loneliness, the terrifying kind that refuses to leave your side even when you are standing in a crowded room surrounded by 100 people, the sinister kind that sets up camp inside your chest, constantly whispering toxic lies that absolutely no one truly sees your soul. No one truly comprehends your depth. No one will ever actually stay. I saw those pitch-black nights when you were physically isolated from the world, and I saw those even darker nights when you were emotionally marooned on an island, despite having people sitting mere feet away from you. I saw how desperately you starved for a genuine raw connection, for just one person who could look at your shattered heart and understand it instantly, without forcing you to exhaustingly explain the wreckage. I saw how your soul screamed for comfort, for fierce gentleness, for an unbreakable presence, for someone Anyon, who could look you dead in the eyes and declare, "I am not going anywhere." I saw how violently you longed to experience a love that didn't come with a hidden blade. And even on the days you felt entirely like a ghost, completely invisible to the human eye, I was fiercely watching over you with a consuming love that has never, for a single millisecond, wavered. I saw your paralyzing fear, the terror of the unknown future, the blinding dread of repeating the catastrophic mistakes of the past, the fear that you are entirely too much for anyone to handle, the simultaneous crushing fear that you will never be enough. I saw the anxiety that forced you to mercilessly second-guess every major decision of your life. I saw the panic that made you aggressively question your own fundamental worth as a human being. I saw the terror that forced you to violently shrink your own personality, making yourself small and quiet just to avoid the sniper fire of rejection. I saw the fear that manipulated you into settling for toxic crumbs when your royal heart demanded a banquet. I saw the pure terror that violently jolted you awake at 3 a.m., the anxiety that sent your mind spiraling into dark apocalyptic dimensions, the panic that caused your heart to hammer against your ribs like a trapped bird. I saw the paralyzing fear that convinced you that you were the only person left on a dying planet. But you were never alone. I was fiercely guarding your perimeter every single second. I saw your maddening confusion, those blinding moments when the universe made absolutely zero sense, when you couldn't possibly decipher why the tragedy happened the way it did, when you were completely blind to the hidden purpose behind the devastating loss, the agonizing delay, the massive shift in reality, the deafening silence of heaven, when you collapsed on your knees screaming, Why me? When you tortured yourself wondering if you were being divinely punished for a past mistake. When you genuinely believed I had completely erased your name from my memory. When you felt like you were navigating a minefield blindfolded, desperately trying to make massive life choices without a shred of clarity, direction, or confidence. I watched you furiously digging for answers while feeling like your entire internal world was violently tangled in knots. And even when you felt like you had fallen off the edge of the map, I knew the exact precise coordinates of your soul. I saw your chilling emotional numbness, those terrifying stretches of time when you felt absolutely zero joy, zero human connection, zero trace of hope. Those haunting moments when you weren't even capable of feeling sad or angry anymore. You were just a hollow, walking shell. The days when you felt like you had absolutely zero blood left to bleed, nothing left to feel, not an ounce of fight left to try again. The moments you completely pulled the plug on your own heart, because actually feeling the depth of your trauma would have instantly killed you. You were not permanently broken, my beautiful child. You were aggressively defending yourself using the absolute only weapons you had left. You weren't a cold monster. You were a casualty of war, and you were simply sick and tired of constantly bleeding out. I saw that chilling numbness, and I never, not for a fraction of a second, cast judgment upon you for it. I didn't retreat from you just because your radar was jammed, and you couldn't sense my presence. I entrenched myself even deeper, supplying you with an invisible, supernatural afford of strength, even when you were entirely convinced you were abandoned. Type, Amen. My soul worships you. If your heart is fiercely lifted in praise. I saw every single time you put on an Oscar, winning performance pretending to be perfectly okay. I saw the fiercely forced smiles, the loud, hollow laughter you deployed as a smokescreen to hide the tears, the clever jokes you weaponized to deflect from the agonizing pain. You have become such an elite master of disguise, projecting an impenetrable aura of strength, that the people closest to you rarely even notice when you are actively bleeding to death in front of them. You have carried yourself with the posture of a titan, even while your internal skeleton was violently turning to dust. You have casually stated, "I'm fine," more times than there are stars in the sky, not because it was the truth, but because you absolutely refused to be a burden, because you despised looking weak, because you were terrified of the firing squad of human judgment. And every single time you swallowed your own truth, every time you violently gagged your own voice, every time you forced the burning tears back down your throat, I saw the entire reality of the battlefield. I saw your devastating silent crying, the scalding tears you wept into the pitch black darkness of your room, muffling the sound so nobody in the house would wake up. The agonizing moments you violently buried your face into your pillow to completely suffocate the screams. The haunting nights when you sobbed until your physical body was violently shaking and entirely devoid of fluid. The nights when you wept uncontrollably without even possessing the vocabulary to explain why. The nights when the trauma aggressively ambushed you out of nowhere. The nights when you carried the literal weight of the world entirely alone. The nights when your sternum felt like it was going to snap in half from the pressure of holding the dam together. I saw every single tear that fell. Not a single drop was wasted. Not one was ignored. Not one went unseen. I saw the agonizing sting of feeling completely forgotten. That violent physical ache in your chest when the people you bled for refused to show up for you, when they couldn't be bothered to check in, when they were completely blind to the fact that you were actively drowning right in front of them. I saw those brutal moments when you scanned the horizon and realized you had absolutely no one in your corner. When you legitimately wondered if a single human being actually cared, when you morbidly wondered if the world would even skip a beat, if you just vanished into thin air. When you watched everyone else seemingly wrapped in love and support, while you were forced to drag your cross up the hill entirely alone. My child, You may have been deeply forgotten by flawed human beings, but you have never, for a fraction of a millisecond, been forgotten by the Creator of the universe. Absolutely nothing you have suffered has slipped past the radar of heaven. Not one single tear, not one shattering heartbreak, not one terrifying, silent night, not one blinding moment of confusion, not one suffocating wave of isolation, not one desperate, screaming cry for rescue, not one frantic prayer exhaled in absolute terror, not one agonizing breath you had to violently fight to take. I saw it all. I aggressively held it all. I threw a massive, invisible shield over you in dimensions you couldn't even perceive. I fiercely protected your fragile mind when it was millimeters away from permanently snapping. I stood like a fortress around your shattered heart when the world swung its heaviest hammer. I marched shoulder to shoulder with you in the trenches, every single second, especially when your senses were too numb to feel me, even when you were utterly convinced I was light years away, even when you swore the heavens were made of brass. I was infinitely closer to you in the darkest trenches of your agony than I ever was during your brightest victories. And now, I need to declare this over your life with the fierce, overwhelming tenderness. Your battered soul is starving for. I never left you. Not for a single second. Not for one fleeting heartbeat. Not for a single heavy sigh. Not for a fraction of a moment when you were violently vibrating under the crushing gravity of your own chaotic emotions. I was standing in the very epicenter of the heartbreak, holding you upright when your chest cracked down the middle. I was present in the terminal exhaustion, pumping supernatural adrenaline into your veins when you had absolutely zero idea how you were still standing. I was there in the devastating disappointment, diving to the floor to catch the shattered pieces of your hope. I was there in the suffocating loneliness, aggressively whispering fierce declarations of love into the empty caverns of your soul. I was there in the blinding fear, wrapping both hands around your violently trembling heart. I was there in the maddening confusion, quietly redirecting your footsteps even when you were completely blind to my navigation. I was there in the freezing numbness, forcefully keeping your spiritual pulse alive when your entire world flatlined. I was present in every single suffocated, silent scream, holding you together while you broke apart. I was fiercely present in every single millisecond you genuinely believed you were entirely forgotten. My beloved, fiercely chosen child, I am stepping forward right now to speak directly into the secret, locked vaults inside you that no human eyes have ever been permitted to see. I am here to completely uncover your silent, suffocated cries, the massive, beautiful longings violently buried beneath the titanium armor you wear for the world, the paralyzing fears you never dared to let cross your lips, the colossal, breathtaking dreams you desperately packed into boxes and buried in the dirt because they felt entirely too fragile to survive the blast radius of another disappointment. I am here to speak directly to the raw, unfiltered pieces of your soul that only I possess the security clearance to view, the pieces you fiercely hide from society, the pieces you violently protect even from your own consciousness, because these quiet, hidden, battered places matter immensely to me. Every single unspoken word, every violently swallowed emotion, every massive longing you falsely convinced yourself was completely impossible. I have heard every single one, and absolutely none of them slipped past the gates of my heart. I heard the agonizing things you could never force your mouth to say. I heard the terrifying, dark thoughts you were far too humiliated to ever admit out loud. I heard the crippling fears you hauled around in utter silence, because you refused to infect others with your worry, or worse, be labeled as weak. I heard the violently shaking questions that echoed in the deepest canyons of your soul. What if I am fundamentally unlovable? What if I catastrophically fail again? What if I am brutally shattered again? What if absolutely nothing ever improves? What if every single person eventually abandons me? What if every beautiful thing I ever dare to hope for is violently ripped from my hands? You never once spoke these terrifying words into the open air, but you relentlessly screamed them inside the padded walls of your own mind, while desperately trying to hold your outside reality together. You tried so incredibly hard to play the role of the brave warrior. You tried to project total calm, but internally, you were fighting apocalyptic, Category 5 hurricanes that you had absolutely no idea how to survive alone. And every single one of those silent, terrifying screams pierced my heart. Not a single one was ignored. I heard the massive, beautiful dreams you violently buried alive. Not because your desire for them ever actually died, but because you were utterly exhausted from constantly bleeding out on the battlefield fighting for things that kept vanishing like smoke. You buried your dreams of explosive, unfiltered joy, because joy had proven itself to be entirely too dangerous and unpredictable. You buried your dreams of epic earth-shaking love, because your heart had been put through the meat grinder entirely too many times. You buried your dreams of a breathtaking future, because chronic disappointment had completely drained your life force. You buried your dreams of total restoration because you were entirely convinced your fragile heart would physically explode if you had to survive one more setback. You buried your dreams of massive purpose because the fog was too thick and you felt hopelessly lost. You buried your dreams of unbreakable peace because the chaotic warfare of your life was screaming entirely too loud. You violently buried dreams that were once brilliantly, blindingly alive, and you aggressively brainwashed yourself into believing it was simply safer to stop wanting them. But I watched you bury them with violently shaking hands. I watched you shove them into the dark because the sheer agony of wanting them was ripping you apart. And listen to me. I dug them up, and I have kept every single one of those dreams fiercely protected in my own hands. They did not die in the dirt. They have merely been held in divine stasis, waiting for the exact moment your resurrected heart was finally strong enough to handle hope once again. I heard the desperate, fragmented prayers you whispered while your entire body was convulsing. You prayed quietly in the dark when your chest tightened like a vice, when your hands were violently shaking, when scalding tears completely blinded your vision. You gasped, "Please, you have to help me." With a voice so utterly broken, even you could barely hear it. You sobbed, "I cannot survive this alone." You begged, "Give me the strength to stand up." You pleaded, "Please do not let my mind snap." You prayed with a level of absolute raw desperation that no human being ever witnessed. And every single one of those shattered, fragmented pleas hit the very center of my heart, like a screaming child desperately reaching out for their father in the dark. I did not bypass them. I did not casually push them to the side. I did not demand you come back when you had a more eloquent prayer or a stronger voice. Your trembling, barely audible whisper was powerful enough to violently shake the foundations of heaven. I heard your violently shaking words infinitely more clearly than you could ever possibly comprehend. I know the suffocating leaden gravity you are forced to carry every single time the sun rises. The catastrophic weight that violently slams into your chest the exact millisecond you open your eyes. The suffocating pressure that settles heavily on your lungs before you even have the chance to take your first deep, conscious breath of the day. I know exactly how waking up often feels like being violently dropped onto a blood-soaked battlefield you absolutely never signed up to fight on. I know how the morning light ruthlessly illuminates the towering mountains of responsibility you feel completely incapable of climbing. It brings back the chaotic emotions you never finished processing the night before, and the agonizing questions that still stare at you with zero answers. I know exactly how much energy you expend desperately trying to glue your fractured pieces together before you even dare to place your feet on the cold floor. I know how you violently push your way through the hours fueled by a phantom strength you don't even actually possess, wearing a meticulously painted mask that hides the terror you are convinced the world would never understand. I know how every single morning has contained a dark, heavy mass, sometimes a crippling dread, sometimes an ocean of sadness, sometimes a total cryogenic numbness, because you had absolutely no idea if today would be merciful, or if the world was preparing to swing the bat at your head again. You genuinely believed no one saw you violently struggling just to survive those early hours. You thought no one noticed the way you aggressively sucked in air, desperately trying to force your heart rate to slow down. You thought no one fully grasped the monumental, superhuman effort it actually required for you just to turn the doorknob and step into the sunlight. But I did. I was fiercely standing guard over you every single morning. I was standing right next to your bed when you woke up feeling completely hollowed out. I was standing over you when the toxic, suffocating weight of yesterday's trauma was still sitting directly on your chest. I was standing beside you when you had to violently force yourself out from under the blankets, even though every screaming cell in your body wanted to retreat into the dark and completely disappear from existence. I stood beside you, my hand resting with immense supernatural power directly over your spirit, aggressively pumping an invisible, divine strength into your veins that you didn't even realize was coming directly from my throne. You have absolutely no concept of how many devastating days you actually survived strictly, because I was the one holding your fragile skeleton together. You have no idea how many times the abyss tried to violently swallow you whole, but completely failed, because my impenetrable presence was wrapped tightly around your soul. You have no idea how many times you genuinely believed you fought your way through the fire on your own strength, when the undeniable reality is that I was carrying you entirely on my back. I have been the ultimate guardian of your heart through every brutal day and every terrifying night. I have been your unyielding strength when your own reserves were permanently depleted. I have been your fierce, unbreakable peace when the chaotic warfare in your mind grew deafening. I have been your absolute comfort when the agonizing echo of loneliness tore through your chest. I have been fiercely guarding the gates of your mind when demonic darkness tried to breach the perimeter. I have been aggressively holding up your arms when the gravity of the world was entirely too heavy to bear. But my beautifully scarred child, I need you to permanently burn this truth into the deepest fibers of your being. Your agonizing pain has never, for a fraction of a second, hardened me toward you. It completely melted me. Your silent, suffocating suffering did not push me away. It aggressively, violently drew me closer. Your paralyzing terror didn't repel me. It violently stirred the deepest depths of my compassion. Your chilling numbness didn't offend me. It shattered my heart for what you had to endure. Your massive disappointments didn't frustrate me. They made me want to throw my arms around you and hold you infinitely tighter. You have never, ever been too much for me. Your chaotic, exploding emotions have never overwhelmed my capacity. Your desperate, angry questions have never intimidated me. Your crippling weakness has never disgusted me. Your massive, desperate need has never been a burden upon my shoulders. Every single agonizing thing you have ever carried, every radioactive ache, every paralyzing fear, every scalding tear, it only violently pulled me closer to you, never further away. I saw the nights you sobbed violently into the pitch, black void, desperately praying the silence would swallow the sound of your shattering heart before anyone in the house could hear you. I saw when you barricaded yourself in your room because you absolutely refused to let the world witness how completely decimated you felt. I saw when you furiously wiped the tears from your eyes so no one would dare ask you what was wrong. I saw when you collapsed on the floor of the shower, letting the water hit your back, because it was literally the only place on earth you felt safe enough to completely fall apart. I saw when you gripped your own chest in agony because the physical pain of the heartbreak was entirely too massive for human vocabulary. I saw when you stared blankly at the wall and whispered into the void, "Does anyone on this earth even care?" I saw when you convulsed with sobs until your physical body gave out. I witnessed the brutal, agonizing torture you endured in absolute privacy, and every single second of it shattered my heart for you. Not in frustration, not in anger, but in a fierce, overwhelming, protective love. Because it was never my design for you to carry the weight of a dying world on your shoulders entirely alone. And when the deaf human world entirely failed to hear your screams, I heard them. When oblivious people completely failed to notice your heart being ripped in half, I noticed it. When absolutely no one on earth possessed the capacity to understand your trauma, I understood it completely. When you felt entirely invisible, like a ghost haunting your own life, my eyes were locked fiercely upon you. When you felt utterly worthless and insignificant, I was cherishing you as royalty. When you felt completely discarded and unwanted, I was aggressively holding you tight. When you felt permanently forgotten by the universe, I was shouting your name in the halls of heaven. When you felt entirely drained of hope, I was forcefully injecting your spirit with a supernatural endurance that refused to let you die. When you felt completely numb to reality, I threw a titanium shield around your heart to prevent it from permanently shattering. When you felt completely crushed by the avalanche, I was quietly covering you in a massive, invisible grace you had no idea you were absorbing. My fiercely loved child, let me finally speak the ultimate truth into a mystery that has tormented you for years. Let me address this suffocating, maddening feeling that your entire existence has been violently delayed, permanently stuck, aggressively slowed down, or completely blocked by an invisible wall you couldn't understand. You have stared at the trajectory of your life and screamed at the sky, wondering why the massive breakthroughs happened so easily for everyone else. While you were left bleeding in the dirt, you furiously demanded to know why massive golden doors that looked absolutely perfect suddenly slammed violently in your face. You interrogated heaven, asking why the people you swore would be there forever suddenly packed up and abandoned you without warning. You begged to know why massive life-altering opportunities slipped through your fingers like water, even when you prayed and fasted with every single ounce of your being. You asked why it felt like every single time you fought tooth and nail to take one bloody step forward, a massive invisible hand shoved you 10 steps backward into the dark. You stared out at the path ahead of you and saw nothing but impenetrable, suffocating fog. You felt like you were navigating an active minefield entirely blind, devoid of direction, devoid of clarity, totally devoid of the desperate answers you were begging me to reveal. But I am ripping the veil off right now to expose the breathtaking truth behind those agonizing delays, behind those devastating endings, behind those brutal extended pauses that you completely despised and railed against. Because hear this, and let it permanently heal your shattered mind. Absolutely none of those endings were a punishment. Every single violent no, every unexpectedly slammed door, every delayed promise, and every sudden departure was a fierce, brilliant, and hyper-calculated act of absolute divine protection. Right? Thank you, God, for holding my hand if you felt His fierce, undeniable closeness right now, and share this message with the world.